Story 1, Moneybags from the Spyro games was awful. The feeling of righteous vindication I had at the end of Game 3 was almost unparalleled. Story 2, you all need to look up what irrational means. Most of you are providing valid reasons to dislike that character. Story 3, this is a unique situation, but there was a comic strip I sometimes read called For Better or For Worse. It wasn't particularly great, but I felt compelled to read it. It had some decent moments. The answer to the question is Anthony from that comic strip. He was the first example of the nice guy stereotype I had encountered. Story 4. There is a book used to teach high school students Spanish, called Mi Propio Auto. The main character begins by describing how his life is perfect. He has many friends and a beautiful girlfriend, but he does not have his own car. He spends the next 2 paragraphs complaining about how much he wants a car. I do not remember the character's name. It has been too long. I just recall how much I disliked that character for being so whiny and entitled. Story 5. Dean from Overboard kidnapped a woman and tricked her into believing she was his wife and the mother of his children. He engaged in a sexual relationship with her under false pretenses. I can't even imagine how much it affected his children to go along with the deception of pretending a stranger was their mother. However, I must admit I would have fallen in love with 80s Kurt Russell myself. Story 6. Everyone here is responding with characters you are meant to dislike. My answer is Felicin from Malazan. I do not care about her tragic backstory. I think she is unlikable. I am not finished with Deadhouse Gates yet, so no spoilers please. Story 7. In any other film than Guardians of the Galaxy, Drax was supposed to be literal and not understand metaphors, but in the end, they just made him seem foolish. Where is Gamora? I'll do you one better. Who is Gamora? I'll do you one better. Why is Gamora? He appears foolish now. Story 8. Brian Griffin continually attempts to pursue his friend's wife, who has consistently rejected him, and he is rather arrogant. Story 9. Dawn in Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show is a self-centered character who mainly caused problems. Story 10. Elizabeth Keene from Blacklist. Her character was always crying and used no logic in any decision made. Additionally, the actress's performance was subpar, making a good show difficult to watch. Story 11. Raymond and Marie from ELR. He is criticized for being an unfaithful husband and overly dependent, while Marie is described as a dramatic and self-centered individual. Story 12. Arya Stark. That would be the fandom, though. Initially, I thought she was bratty and cliched, but when I expressed that, I received threats in my Tumblr inbox. So I dislike her. Story 13. The character Bug from Sense8 reminds me of all the nerdy friends I used to have who would always make sexual comments and ultimately ended up assaulting me, even though they knew I was a lesbian. It has the same energy. Story 14. As much as I love The Lord of the Rings, the best trilogy ever, I honestly can't stand the character of Frodo in the movie, and I can't even explain why. Story 15. Robert Jeffrey Hill is chubby, gluttonous, lazy, and obnoxious, while his dad is a hardworking grill fuel salesman and a former high school football star. Lama Sanglug is unlikely to achieve much in life beyond a promotion at the Arlen Dirt Factory, if he's lucky. Story 16. I dislike the kind of insincere main or side characters who do objectively unlikable things and get away with it without consequences, or are even celebrated for such behavior because they are important to the story. There are too many to name. Story 17. Umaru-chan from Himuto. Umaru-chan is an irredeemable character. She is selfish, slovenly, manipulative, and crass, with no sense of empathy. She constantly takes advantage of those around her to support her life of laziness. Her poor brother loves her but, in some ways, enables her lifestyle. It is disheartening to see someone have their life sidelined to support a sibling's inability to mature. She deserves to remain in her gremlin form so the world can see her true nature. Story 18. Irrational Hate. Riku from Final Fantasy X. There is something about that character, or rather that archetype, that I can't stand, but I cannot articulate why. I just don't like that character at all. The same goes for Yuffie from Final Fantasy VII. Story 19. Nathaniel from the Bartimaeus series left me frustrated with his character. My feelings about him even ended a relationship I was in at the time. Story 20. I will probably get criticized for this, but it's Pam from The Office. I think it's because she reminds me of an old best friend I had who turned out to be terrible. Story 21. Cameron Diaz's character in My Best Friend's Wedding evokes my sympathy, as she receives the short end of the stick. However, I find her character quite difficult to appreciate. Story 22. Almost the entire cast of And Just Like That has changed significantly from Sex and the City. I liked the original series but greatly dislike what most of the characters have become in its sequel. It seems like the writers have included as many token characters as possible, including people of different racial backgrounds, transgender individuals, and non-binary people. While adding new characters could be beneficial, they lack depth and often feel like diversity hires. In fact, one of the characters, Che, is portrayed in a rather negative manner. Despite my criticisms, I still watch the show. It's cringeworthy and does a disservice to the original characters, while not giving the new ones much to work with. Nevertheless, I continue to watch. Story 23. I disliked how Dory mistreated the octopus in Finding Dory. He had a clear goal of wanting to live safely in Cleveland and not return to the ocean. He does not experience any character growth or undergo anything that changes his mind. Dory pressures him into going along with her plans, and he suddenly declares he wants to return to the ocean at the end, now that he feels he has no choice. Story 24. Hester Prynne's daughter, Pearl, in The Scarlet Letter. The scene in the book where Hester is enjoying her solitude, letting down her hair and removing the letter, but then toddler Pearl becomes upset and makes her put the letter back on, is heartbreaking. I understand the symbolism and the thematic importance of that scene and Pearl's fixation on the letter in general, but taking the plot literally makes me dislike the child. I just want to yell at her. Let your mom enjoy one single moment of unburdened peace and freedom. Story 25. Dobby, the house elf from Harry Potter, is quite bothersome. I feel alone in this, but I can't overlook how irritating he is. Story 26. Jane Eyre. I was forced to read that book in high school, and the whole time she seems whiny and entitled. Story 27. Winona Ryder's character in Reality Bites is portrayed as lazy, entitled, uncreative, and privileged. Despite these flaws, she serves as our hero and point-of-view character. Story 28. Not truly fiction, but fictionalized. Caroline Maringles, from the Little House books, not the television version. She held racist views against Native Americans, was often a spoilsport, disliked puns and her husband's dad jokes, and was a teetotaler. Awful. Story 29. Clara from Doctor Who killed my love for the show as swiftly as a bullet between the eyes. Why? It's hard to say exactly, but I viewed her as poorly written and poorly acted, a low-quality version of Amy Pond. I disliked how she tried to appear tough and worldly, but she just fell flat. She always needed saving, but not in the typical Doctor Who way you would expect. I found her to be a poor companion and disliked her entire story arc. I wish she could have just stayed dead. After her first season with Capaldi, I never returned to watch any more Doctor Who. I hold a strong dislike for her character. Story 30. Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3. I absolutely cannot understand why anyone likes her, let alone romances her. She has a mean attitude that made me send her back to camp. Even after her redemption arc, she remains unlikable. I did have her and Lizelle in my party once, and Lizelle told her that if she finds everyone so distasteful, she is free to leave. I actually laughed. I really liked all the companions except her. Karlak was my romance in my first playthrough, followed by Asterion and Lizelle. I'm planning to see if I can get Gale in my next run. Story 31. Holden Caulfield is the source of all his own problems but blames everything on everyone else. The author included the death of his sibling to make the whiny, self-absorbed character seem more sympathetic. Story 32. Beth Dutton in Yellowstone is a terrible character and actress. I could only get through a few episodes before giving up on the show entirely. Story 33. Phoebe from Friends has some funny lines, but I dislike how quirky and random she is. It's quite obnoxious. Story 34. Fran Goldsmith in The Stand. I can't stand her character, even though she is one of the main protagonists in the book. Story 35. Dolores Jane Umbridge is still very unpleasant. I have never before or since screamed profanities at a book. Story 36. Severus Snape. I was bullied at school a lot, but it didn't make me an involuntary celibate. During my time in office, I went out of my way to prevent my juniors from getting bullied. You can't go around bullying kids who have no power because the girl of your dreams married your bully and save the worst for the two kids you indirectly orphaned. Always my foot. I like how Snape was a complex character, but if anyone tries to justify his actions because he was bullied or unloved, then you are a red flag. I'm not even bringing up his fascination with neo-Nazi groups. Story 37. Jadzia Dax is annoying and bratty, showing no respect for anyone's boundaries. I wasn't sorry when she died, but I did feel bad that her actress was treated poorly by Rick Berman. Story 38. Carrie Bradshaw. I loved her when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. However, I absolutely cannot stand her now that I am older. Story 39. Lwaxana Troy is often considered the most insufferable character in all of Star Trek. The character was intentionally written to be annoying, but the portrayal went too far. I find myself skipping almost every episode in which she appears. Story 40. That show about a camp, Lasso Camp for Imaginary Kids, never appealed to me. I never watched it, but I would see it in commercials. I don't know if it was the jokes they highlighted or the art style, but the main character annoyed me, and I refused to watch it out of disdain and pride. Story 41. Have you ever played Final Fantasy VII Remake or Rebirth? If so, you probably also dislike Chadley, but I doubt you dislike him as much as I do. Story 42. There is a character named Aerie in a video game called Baldur's Gate 2. You dislike her. She is very nice, but she can be quite whiny. Some people love her, but I don't understand why. Story 43. Morgana in Persona 5. I dislike that cat. Every time it appeared on screen, I instantly had the urge to kick it into the stratosphere. If it were physically possible, I would have grabbed that little creature and punched it repeatedly in the face. Story 44. Beverly Marsh. It didn't used to be this way, but I went to the big Coca-Cola store in Las Vegas and tried one of those around-the-world samplers. Man, Beverly, you are now guilty by association. I know the clown isn't going to get her. Never has, never will, but seriously, Beverly. Story 45. Ronald Weasley. Honestly, I can't pinpoint exactly one reason, but anytime I read the books, I find him incredibly annoying and frustrating as a character and friend. At this point, whenever I read fan fiction, my favorite ones are always where he is either killed off or publicly shunned, so he is not part of the story. Story 46. Irrationally maybe is HBO's Jon Snow. I have mixed feelings about Book Jon, but as the show progressed, I struggled to understand people's love for a rather boring and generic character. He consistently does the right thing, even though it often backfires. He is not as great a fighter as people claim. Most of his victories are due to luck, and after a while he kept failing upward. The writers failed to create anything interesting with his big moment at the end of Season 5, which felt more like a minor inconvenience. Less irrational is HBO's Tyrion, as the show writers abruptly stopped his character arc and descent into villainy after Season 4, transforming him into a mopey character devoid of the original wit and cunning. It makes me wonder if they really read the books or George R.R. Martin's notes for the ending. Story 47. Pick any character Michael B. Jordan has played, and it ties for first with all the other characters he has portrayed. His acting just irritates me. Story 48. Stephen from Django Unchained. Leonardo DiCaprio was despicable as Calvin Candy, but Samuel L. Jackson stole the show with that performance. Story 49. Deborah Barone, having an Italian mother-in-law is highly advantageous. If you can't differentiate basil from tarragon, that's an issue you need to discuss with your eye doctor. Story 50. I can't stand Zuko from Avatar. He always came off to me like a spoiled brat, even after his redemption. Story 51. Dean Winchester was often difficult to deal with and rarely listened to or trusted Sam. He acted under the guise of protecting him but never allowed Sam to be his own person or make his own choices. Story 52. At the end of the game, The Last of Us Part 2, I felt uncomfortable playing as Ellie during the final fight between her and Abby. I admired Abby and her humanity, while Ellie seemed to lose hers. That fight made me feel terrible. However, it had a great outcome and was poetic, at least. Story 53. I cannot stand any character Ben Stiller has ever played. I don't know why, but I find his face completely unappealing. It's entirely irrational, but my feelings are my own. Story 54. Rachel from Friends is probably why I can't stand Jennifer Aniston, as she has that same personality in every role. Story 55. Holden in The Expanse. In a universe filled with ambiguity, I found him rather insufferable and whiny, constantly attempting to do the right thing. I understand that's the essence of his character, but he simply annoyed me. Story 56. The character in Berserk, called Griffith, sacrificed his entire army and friends to achieve his dream of having a kingdom. Story 57. Skylar from Breaking Bad. Honestly, it's brilliant writing to make the victim of a meth cook look like the bad guy, but she was irritating. Story 58. Plant Girl from Sky High. I don't believe in using my powers unless I have to. Then why are you going to superpower school, you entitled jerk? Story 59. Dan Connor from Roseanne reminded me of the loud, exaggerated fathers I grew up around in the Midwest. They peaked in high school as athletes and are now mere shadows of their former selves. It's irrational because the Angry Dan scenes on the show, though intimidating, weren't actually that frequent. I've been a bit unfair. I have always disliked the episode where he confronts the obnoxious boyfriend, but that's because I found it unrealistic and contrived. Story 60. Fitzwilliam Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet are two insufferable individuals who deserve one another. But why should we have to read about them? Story 61. Cheryl Palmer, former First Lady, once said that it's been over 20 years and she can't remember the exact reasons, but she realized at that time that this actress must be talented, because if she saw her in public, she would confront her. Story 62. Icheb from Star Trek Voyager is just awful. When I rewatch the series, I try to skip as many of his episodes as I can. Story 63. Is it irrational to hate Adam Baldwin for a personal reason, and as a result, hate all the characters he portrays? Story 64. The Way Clan and the other leaders of Sacred Valley in the Cradle series by Will White. Lyndon should have burned them to ash the moment they turned on him. Story 65. I don't like that little blonde boy or the purple-haired girl from the Owl House. Every time I see them, they look so smug, but they are probably decent enough characters. Story 66. Ashley on Degrassi. The Next Generation. Watching those early seasons feels like experiencing a mental health crisis when the episode revolves around her. She is portrayed as both a popular overachiever and the character who often engages in the most questionable behavior. Then there's Claire. While not always the focus, there are about 4 seasons toward the end of her storyline where it essentially becomes the Claire show. And for the love of all that is good, Marco. Most of the male gay characters are annoying, but this trend really started with him. Sobbing in his blood-stained sweater days after Jimmy got shot, reminiscent of Jackie Kennedy? That is so melodramatic. His family resembles a borderline racist caricature of Italian immigrants, almost like a 1940s portrayal. I half expected the camera to pan up and reveal pizza dough splattered on the ceiling. Speaking of which, they were supposed to be making these lavish Italian meals, but it was clearly just store-bought sauce over cold pasta. There's a scene where Marco's dad, with the most inconsistent accent one could imagine, exclaims, "I don't even know what this is, the gay." And I thought, come on, Degrassi. Italy is a modern country. They know what LGBTQ plus people are. Story 67. Quentin Coldwater from the Magician's books. I have never watched the television show, so I am unsure if he is different in that adaptation. I listened to many audiobooks during my drives around Atlanta. I disliked the character but felt compelled to finish the book. At the end, when the narrator says, Quentin's story will continue in book 2, I remember immediately saying out loud, not for me, it isn't, and switching to the radio for a while. I have no idea what happens to those characters, and I do not care to find out. Story 68. Ava from Borderlands 3. My wife and I love Borderlands 3, but we both did not care for Ava. She is Maya's apprentice and is learning to be a siren. Her character was poorly written, and the plot did not assist her development at all. Story 69. Prince from Echo 3 didn't listen to his wife, which led to her kidnapping. He quickly became involved with a colleague just 2 weeks after her abduction and spent the entire season lamenting her situation. I wished for his character to die in every episode. That character ruined the entire series. Zoe Barnes from House of Cards always rubbed me the wrong way. Story 70. I read a considerable amount of Victorian-era literature, and in many of the novels I can't stand the hero or heroine. I often enjoy the books, but the characters I am supposed to sympathize with are frustrating. In more modern literature, James Holden from The Expanse makes one poor decision after another for the wrong reasons, displaying selfish motives and consistent double standards. Yet, most people love him as a character. Story 71. I don't understand what you mean by irrationally, because I have only ever hated anyone rationally. To answer your question, the fictional character I hate the most is the villain at the beginning of Gremlins who tries to get the main character's dog killed just to cause him sadness. I have hated that character for most of my life, and the passion still burns strong. In a perfect world, there would have been a 27-minute scene in Gremlins where the creatures would have attacked her until she became a mere skeleton. Story 72. Sori from Tales of Zestiria is the main character. I can't explain why I disliked him. He just grated on me. I kept trying to like him, but I couldn't. From the first moment he appeared on the screen, I felt, I don't like this character. No idea why. Story 73. Every character in the movie Booksmart made me want to break things for reasons I cannot explain. Story 74. Lisa Simpson. Ever since she became a vegetarian and tried to make her family and all of Homer's friends eat tomato soup at his barbecue, I have disliked her immensely. I wish she would stop trying to impose her views on others. Story 75. Tammy from Bob's Burgers annoys me significantly. Also, Sophia Petrillo is quite harsh towards her daughter. She reminds me of my grandmother, who never had a good word to say about my mother, even when my mother took care of her after she had an accident. My grandmother was quite difficult to deal with. Story 76. Devora from Mortal Kombat. The only good thing about her is that she saves YouTubers from demonetization. Her blood is blue. Her voice is annoying. Personality, backstabbing. Gameplay, frustrating due to excessive grabbing. Story 77. 02. I hated that everyone thought she was the best waifu, even though she is average. Yes, I still think she is average, but I don't care now. Story 78. Alice and Alphinaud Leveler from Final Fantasy XIV. Although I actually like both of them now, every time that pompous little character would send me on a quest, I wanted to level him right there. Oh, you're cold? You're just gonna wait right here? Blimum. Okay. RKO out of nowhere. As if I haven't been running around in scraps from the last area fighting literal gods in this weather. But it's fine. That's why they call me the hero. Alice irks me because after everything you go through with Alphinaud and see what he endures and how hard he tries to fix things, she just treats him poorly and acts like she's done so much that she hasn't even had the time to hear about the world almost ending several times and us saving it. Like, earn your place, sweetie. You aren't anything yet. By the way, my second daughter's name is Alice. Story 79. Laura Miller from The Jackie Thomas Show watched the show reluctantly because my girlfriend wanted to watch. Catherine Merrick from The John Larroquette Show stopped watching the show when she became a series regular. Joanna from Friends was glad her role was only for a few episodes. All portrayed by Alison La Placa. She hasn't acted for a decade, but back then, if I saw her, I'd change the channel if I could. I just don't like her. She annoys me. I don't have a real explanation as to why. For all I know, she's a really nice person, but she made the hairs on my neck stand up. Story 80. Daphne from Frasier made it difficult for me to enjoy a sitcom I otherwise would have liked. I found her annoying and unfunny. Story 81. Not just one character, but any role Donnie Wahlberg played after 2005. I know rationally that Donnie is the good Wahlberg brother and, by all accounts, is a very nice human being. I understand that my feelings are entirely my own issue. However, I dislike every single one of his roles because I see his face, and all I think about is Eric Matthews, the embodiment of many problems with American policing in the Saw series. Credit where it's due, he performed exceptionally well in that role, but that's the core issue. He acted at the level of Kevin Spacey in his various villain roles, and my instinct suggests that there's too much truth in that portrayal. Story 82. Eli from the Misunderstood Club was undoubtedly an envious and manipulative character. She betrayed her best friend and still wanted to play the victim. I was certainly angry with her. Story 83. I dislike Shuckle. I always have and always will. I have no idea why, but whenever I see that character, I feel furious. Story 84. Theodore Bagwell in Prison Break has a dead-eyed smirk while committing horrific acts, making him both chilling and infuriating to watch. Story 85. Annie from Attack on Titan is a psychopath who enjoys killing innocent people yet is treated with affection and never faces consequences for her actions. Negan from The Walking Dead survives due to plot convenience, with a narrative that absurdly equates a totalitarian regime run by a psychopath with the protagonist's group as if they were equivalent. Story 86. Damon from The Vampire Diaries. I don't know why, but I have disliked him from beginning to end, while everyone else seems to love him. I have also never liked Elena. Story 87. I can think of several shows, but as a kid I really disliked Doogie Howser, MD. He featured a two-shoes genius boy who became a doctor at the age of 12. We were expected to care about his journey toward emotional maturity. There were many episodes with people expressing concern like, I don't want him operating on me, because of his age, and the show implied they were being narrow-minded. However, I think that's a fair concern. Would you want a child as your doctor? I recognize that part of this was me being a little judgmental. Story 88. When I was a child, I disliked Betty Boop. I found her facial features quite unappealing. However, after watching some of her cartoons, I realized I had been unfair. She is amazing. Story 89. Carrie Bradshaw. I can't believe we all liked her when Sex and the City originally aired. She is a whiny, self-absorbed, spoiled individual. Story 90. Dawn and Xander from Buffy were both written with bratty, entitled, and unpleasant personalities. Yet it is clear you are meant to root for them. They both had good moments and improved over time. Unlike that new potential slayer who ends up with Willow, she was unbearable. Story 91. SpongeBob. I dislike his appearance, voice, color, and personality. Everything about him is repulsive to me. Yet he is probably the most beloved fictional cartoon character of my generation. Story 92. I really disliked Piper Chapman, not because she is an entitled and overall annoying character, but purely because of the face she makes when she cries in a scene, resembling an upside-down ghost face. It offended me as a viewer to witness it. Story 93. Dakota Fanning's character in the movie War of the Worlds was quite intense. She portrayed a young girl who was understandably panicking in a frightening situation. While her performance was powerful and fitting for her age, it left me feeling frustrated with her character. I feel conflicted about that reaction. Story 94. Just read The Count of Monte Cristo. Mercedes, after everything that happened to Edmond Dantes, asks him not to kill her son in a duel, which the son demanded. Edmond agrees to let her son win by killing him, essentially committing suicide to make Mercedes happy. Mercedes is all, "Thank you, Edmond. Goodbye." She married a wealthy man because she thought Edmond was dead, but then discovered he was alive and let him sacrifice his life so her arrogant son could live. The book is different and much longer than the movie. Story 95. Stuart from Mad TV and his mom. To this day, I have daydreams of suffocating them and laughing maniacally as I watch them take their last audible, strained gasp of air. Also, Ross from Friends. Story 96. Timmy Turner from Fairly OddParents was frustrating to me as a child. Additionally, Blue from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends was quite annoying and not amusing at all. Story 97. Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. I have never read the books, but in the show, he is portrayed as someone who is bullied for being a bastard and a virgin. Everyone who watches the show admires him as if he is cool and tough, but he is just an ordinary guy who is somewhat of a loser and a mediocre soldier. Story 98. I disliked the Cutie Mark Crusaders from My Little Pony. They improve a bit in the later seasons, but in the beginning they are extremely annoying, in my opinion. I always thought they should have had their own show aimed at a younger audience. When they finally receive their cutie marks, they are neither very cute nor unique, as they are meant to be. Story 99. Beverly on Roseanne is partially to blame for Roseanne and Jackie being difficult. She can never stop being so overbearing. If she had been my mother, I would have cut her off before I had my second child, let alone my third. Story 100. The doctor in Flowers for Algernon was a character I liked until the end of the book, when his attitude frustrated me significantly. Story 101. Any of the Brady children and their parents too. Alice was fine. Let's also include the Partridge Family in this discussion. Story 102. Carrie Matheson in Homeland conceals a severe mental illness to be a Central Intelligence Agency officer, putting her colleagues and assets at extreme risk. Much of her behavior and actions are not adventurous. They are selfish and narcissistic. Story 103. Claire Dunphy, Mitchell Pritchett, Alex Dunphy, and Amani Delgado without Luke. I wish they would create another season where these four are lost at sea, making it the perfect summer episode. Story 104. Seahawk from Shi'ar and the Princesses of Power is not a terrible person, just a complete idiot who is willing to put his friends in danger for the sake of adventure. Bolin and Mako from The Legend of Korra have their own flaws. One doesn't develop much until season 4, while the other has less personality than cardboard. Story 105. Fair Arkharron from the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. To be fair, I dislike the entire series, but she comes across as whiny and foolish. Michael Burnham from Star Trek Discovery. The most unscientific scientist ever. What's going on? Story 106. I know it's almost cliché, which is probably why nobody has mentioned it, but Jar Jar Binks has received criticism for various reasons. Story 107. I can't stand that baby doll monster in Toy Story. I don't even know its name and I dislike it. Story 108. I am prepared to be criticized here. Frankie from The Women. I liked the book and loved the topic, but that character drove me insane. I wish I could pinpoint why, but I did not like her. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.